So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan and to our press conference today. If I could just ask everyone to quickly mute your phone, just in case we get interrupted with phone calls. Our topic today, as you know from the handout, is Japan's official development assistance and democracy. And our speakers today are looking at and petitioning the government to reconsider the role of Japan's official development assistance, particularly in light of the rise of threats to what you might say liberal democracy in various countries around the world where Japan has been offering aid. One of the highlights in the handout you have is what is happening in Cambodia right now, with an election taking place as we speak. And as you may be aware, the opposition party was officially disbanded on the order of the courts in Cambodia last year, and the head of the opposition party has been jailed for allegations of treason. Our speakers today have quite some experience on the ground in Cambodia and other countries in Southeast Asia working on aid programs and election monitoring. If I could introduce our speakers in order of how they will speak today. Yasunobu Sato, who's a professor at the University of Tokyo, where he is the director of the Research Center for Sustainable Peace. Maiko Ichihara, who's associate professor at Hitotsubashi University, and Michiya Kumaoka, a professor at the Japan Institute of the Moving Image. As you may have noticed, we did have 4 speakers today, but you can only count 3 people here. Unfortunately, Mr. Akashi has just returned from Beijing and couldn't make the press conference. So, without further ado, Mr. Sato will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm very honored to give our presentation. Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. This paper translated to English. This proposal regarding Japan ODA and democracy is officially submitted to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Actually, Vice Minister Nakane received. Actually, Mr. Akashi was there, and we discussed something and he promised, Mr. Nakane promised this be handed to the Minister of Taro Kono. So I hope now the Ministry of Foreign Affairs considering seriously. And regarding the Ministry of Justice, Kamikawa, and also the Minister of Education, Mr. Hayashi, we already passed on this draft to their senior officials. So these ministers also should have reading this and considering their reply, I hope. Just introduce myself. I myself participated in UNTAC, United Nations Authority Cambodia, as Mr. Akashi was the head, my boss and boss. I was at that time very small fish, human rights officer there. And since then, I was committed myself for the rule of law project in Cambodia and other countries such as the Soviet Union and socialist countries, the transitional economies. And then now I'm working with Mr. Kumaoka. Kumaoka-san is actually the expert of the NGO for Cambodian NGO, Japan People's Forum for Cambodia. And Ichihara-san, we recently known each other because such a Japanese assistance to democracy as a topic. So we share sometimes a research meeting. The reason why we just submitted this paper, as Peter suggested, now of course, Cambodia situation is so bad, and we are very concerned as a sort of a graduate of Mr. Akashi's school of the UNTAC. So this is, of course, starting point. And my co-representative, Mr. Inoue, Ken Inoue, was also our colleague. He participated in UNTAC as, of course, especially for the governance officer. Since then, he was working in some other UN positions, especially for the governance. So we discussed the situation in Cambodia. I was committed such as rule of law project. Japan, as you may know, they're committed for the law reform assistance in Cambodia since UNTAC departure, because rule of law is quite key for sustainable peace. And so some success, especially the positive law, the drafting basic law, fundamental law. But recently, this law and system, especially judiciary, is not working for the people. Sometimes more justifies than human rights violations. So we are very concerned the situation. Why so? And Mr. Inoue also, as a JICA expert, assisting the election, but despite of their efforts, especially our philosophy of the ODA, the rule of law and democracy, it's not actually successfully implemented in that country. So we just underlined the 4 specific recommendations, as you see, that page 3 and page 4. I just explained. First, in order to address this kind of gap of the philosophy of the democracy and human rights and the rule of law, and also the actual operations of the JICA and other Japanese assistance in the field, we have to create some special post for the expert specialist for the democratic governance and development aid in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because this key ministry is for the ODA, the Japanese diplomacy, and appoint some specialists of this democratic governance and development, and external experts, excluding high-level special envoys to these countries. And the second, using such program as a JICA volunteer program or any other way, they provide democratic assistance on the grassroots level through civil societies organizations in developing countries. Because democracy is from the bottom up, as Mr. Kumaoka will make a presentation. These days, civic space is shrinking, so we have to encourage NGOs and civil societies in Cambodia and other countries for democracy in the society. And third point is Ministry of Justice now is promoting a so-called judicial diplomacy, just promoting a rule project, but basically the Cambodia and Vietnam and other countries, in my understanding, is not so successful yet, because not actually rule of law emerging, just a rule by law, unfortunately. So we have to just encourage more access to justice of the people, and of course legal education. And fourth, last but not least, is as we are professor of the academia, university, so we should also be more actively contribute for this kind of practice as maybe the feedback of the full research, deep, profound research of situations why it's not working well, and then we should propose this kind of recommendation. Then we have to work together for beyond any sort of limitation of the government and the civil society and the academia. So that is 4 points we are recommending. So now I pass my floor to Mr. Ms. Ichihara-san. So please, your floor.
Okay. Well, is it in? Thank you very much for the introduction. Well, first of all, I sincerely appreciate that FCCJ kindly provides us of this opportunity today. My name is Maiko Ichihara, Associate Professor of in the Graduate School of Law at Hitotsubashi University. I'm a scholar of international relations, and my field of research is democracy support activities of Japan in comparison with other countries. In recent years, I have been doing research on Asian activities on this front. Thus, as a scholar of international support for democracy, I would like to talk about the state of democracy, the discourse and activities of the Japanese government on this front, and other Asian countries' activities. Democracy has been weakened internationally over the past decade. China and Russia have been increasingly manipulating information through media, academia, think tanks, and governments around the world to formulate pro-China and pro-Russia opinion internationally, to attack democracy, and to spread authoritarian ways of governance. This fact has been reported by many think tanks for the past 2 years, which include the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Computational Propaganda Project at the University of Oxford. Chinese hackers meddling into the upcoming general election in Cambodia, which was recently reported by U.S. cybersecurity firm FireEye, is one of such examples. Russia's meddling into the 2016 U.S. election is another widely reported example. But similar examples are seen everywhere in the world nowadays. Given the activities of the sharp power, if I use the phrase of a report from the National Endowment for Democracy published in 2017, space for activities for domestic NGOs has shrunk, international funding for domestic NGOs are banned, international NGOs are pushed out of countries, opposition parties are weakened or forced to dismiss, and independent media outlets are closed down in a number of countries, including Argentina, Peru, Poland, Slovakia, Thailand, and Cambodia. Furthermore, populism has spread globally, and such democratic great powers as the United States and the United Kingdom are becoming increasingly inward-looking. Their interest in international democracy support has shrunk. President Donald Trump of the United States is broadcasting a message of lack of interest in democracy and fondness for authoritarianism, which has an especially negative symbolic impact because, according to Samuel Huntington's prominent book on democratization called The Third Wave, quote, the pervasiveness of democratic norms rested in large part on the commitment to those norms of the most powerful country in the world, unquote. Thus, scholars such as John Eikenberry began to expect Japan play a leading role in the maintenance of the liberal international order. Indeed, Japan has a reason to do so. Japan has been a beneficiary of the liberal international order that comprise such values as freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, which was supported by the Western countries. Protection of civil liberties in other countries, such as freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assemblies, has enabled many Japanese to access information abroad, establish networks with people abroad, and to have their lives abroad. The rule of law has maintained certain level of predictability to Japanese business abroad. Given that U.S. underwriter role of international democracy has been weakened, Japan should expand its role for international democracy support, This is not only normative but beneficial from the standpoint of Japan's national interest as well. The deterioration of democracy has been weakening Japan's international influence. Such countries as Thailand and Cambodia became increasingly dependent on assistance from China, became pro-China as they strengthened their authoritarian rule. On the other hand, while Myanmar liberalized in the early 2010s and approached the Western countries to neutralize the influence of China, Japan did not have a strong diplomatic channel initially with the National League for Democracy led by Aung San Suu Kyi. It is imperative to establish diverse channels with actors abroad, and not limited to governmental actors, for healthy long-term diplomatic relations, which do not get heavily weakened even at times of regime change in partner countries. When looking at Japanese foreign policy, there has never been such a time in the past like today when the term democracy appeared so frequently in Japanese foreign policy statements. The Japanese government repeatedly mentions democracy, along with other values such as the rule of law and human rights, as a universal value that has guided and will continue guiding Japan's external behavior. Ever since the Arc of Freedom and Prosperity concept was launched in 2006 by Foreign Minister Taro Aso of the first Shinzo Abe cabinet, consecutive Japanese administrations have emphasized democracy and explained Japanese foreign policy in relation to this value. This tendency has especially been striking in the consecutive Abe administrations since December 2012. Japan's values-based diplomacy shows the resolve to support democracy abroad. The National Security Strategy, the first guideline the Japanese government created in 2013 about Japan's foreign and security policies, states, quote, "As an advanced, liberal, and democratic nation based on the principle of human security, Japan will actively utilize its ODA in supporting democratization, the development of legal systems, and human rights," unquote. The 5 principles Prime Minister Abe declared at the time of his visit to Jakarta in January 2013 also state that Japan would play a role in consolidating and expanding universal values such as liberal democracy and basic human rights. Reflecting the Japanese government's increased emphasis on democracy support, Japan increased foreign aid provision for state institutions, elections, and civil society of developing countries, which are typical target sectors of democracy assistance. Through ODA, Japan has shared its own experiences with democracy, providing the capacity-building assistance necessary for the operation of state institutions, and providing material and financial support for elections and state institutions that promote democratic governance. However, while capacity building for state institutions could assist good governance, democratic governance requires more than that. If a country intends to support democracy, it would be indispensable to support transparency, accountability, and checks and balances. Support for the civil society that play the checking role in those societies is of importance. In the case of Japan, however, while foreign aid provided for civil society increased in the 2010s, this aid remains incomparably small compared to aid provided for state institutions of recipient countries. While support is provided for media, targets of the support are state, not independent media. There has been no support provided for political parties. Other Asian democracies have already made serious attempts of democracy support, especially the works of Indonesia and Taiwan are worth mentioning. In the mid-2000s, Indonesia began working to position the term democracy as a shared norm among the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Furthermore, the Indonesian government, under the initiative of Foreign Minister Hassan Wirayuda, launched the Bali Democracy Forum in 2008 as an intergovernmental forum on democracy, encouraging dialogue and cooperation among regional governments. One of Indonesia's primary policy instruments for democracy assistance is the Institute for Peace and Democracy, or IPD. IPD was established by Foreign Minister Wirayuda's initiative in 2008 as a non-governmental organization and as the implementer of the BDF. Expanding from a mere implementing arm of the BDF, Bali Democracy Forum, IPD has assisted democracy abroad. Although no governmental funding scheme is attached to its activities, Wirayuda as a patron and retired Lieutenant General Agus Wijojo as the chairman of IPD connect IPD with the Indonesian government, leading Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Indonesian embassies to be deeply involved in the project creation processes. IPD shares Indonesia's democratization experience with other ASEAN countries such as Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, not necessarily using the term democracy as an umbrella term, but focusing more on the technical aspects necessary for democratic development, including state institution reform, government accountability, political party reform, parliamentary reform, media training, accountability, responsiveness, and checks and balances. In the case of Taiwan, Taiwanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs initiated the establishment of a foundation for democracy support in the early 2000s and established the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy in June 2003. The Taiwan Foundation for Democracy is assigned the missions of creating partnership with democracy-related organizations abroad and supporting the activities of the civil society and think tanks for the betterment of democracy. Democracy support became an important part of Taiwan's foreign policy. In the case of Japan, despite the values-based diplomacy, there is no institution to support democracy abroad. This has been making Japan's values-based diplomacy a mere branding strategy with weak substance. That is why we propose the creation of a post within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to command the creation and implementation of comprehensive policies on ODA and democracy. The substance of assistance contents need to be changed as well. We urge the Japanese government to provide democracy assistance on the grassroots level through civil society organizations. Stop giving endorsement to elections conducted without fairness and freeness. And aid should not be operated as solely government-to-government operations. There needs a mechanism to incorporate civil society actors as well. Proliferation of discussion on liberal democracy of other countries is also needed for awareness building and confidence building. More Japanese language publications, conferences, projects on this topic is highly desirable. For that purpose, we urge the Japanese government to expand support for the academia on this front. While the Malaysian election in May was a positive news, it seems to have strengthened the sharp power activities of some authoritarian countries. They are proactively taking steps. If the Japanese government remains reactive, it will let the authoritarian countries expand their influence at the expense of Japanese influence. Democracy is not only a normative matter, but a matter of national interest. We urge the Japanese government to take a bold step for the liberal international order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ichihara-san. So our final speaker, Mr. Kumaoka. Mr. Kumaoka also works at the refugee examination as a refugee examination counselor at the Justice Ministry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for us three and for me to be here and to have the honorable occasion to speak up for even a small presentation on Cambodia. I started my NGO career in 1980 when I went to Thailand to wish to make the relief services for the Indo-Chinese refugees, including Cambodian refugees, Laotian refugees, and Vietnamese refugees. And at the same time, we organized and we found Japanese NGO named Japan International Volunteer Center, abbreviation just JVC. And then 80 and 81, we sent stencils or some material for children inside Cambodia from Thailand. And of course, we work in the Thailand and the Thai-Cambodian border. And then 82, we have an agreement with Oxfam UK, then now Oxfam GB, for the well drinking water supply program. Then my colleague went there in Cambodia, 82. And 83, I have a chance to be there visiting and to join this well drinking team in Takeo, because our assignment was that to make 40 wells in the 40 health centers in Takeo province. Anyway, this is March 83 is my first chance to visit Cambodia. Then roughly 4 years after Pol Pot regime fall, but still not much to be advanced in rehabilitation. And also, I spent roughly 4 years in Cambodia in 80s, so-called Heng Samrin regime or Heng Samrin Hun Sen regime, which is a very rare occasion because Western people, not many, only 50, 60, with 7, 8, 10 NGOs alone only in Cambodia. And 91, 93, of course, we have a Paris Peace Accord and Cambodian general election under Antak under Mr. Akashi. And then 93, we formulated the People's Forum on Cambodia, Japan. And after 93 election is quite, very special form. It was done under Antak, but for 98, a year after coup d'etat, 1998 election, and 03, 08, 13 election, we, People's Forum on Cambodia, make all monitoring with the COMFREL and NICFEC, and based in Bangkok, ANFREL, Asian team for free and fair election committee. And then this, my working experience, of course, I worked in the Iraq or Palestine or Jordan or Horn of Africa or wherever, but Cambodia is the very impressive country and impressive people for me. And then here, this is a very famous picture. Maybe you know better than me because you are journalists and correspondents. This is what happened in the last year, September 3rd. The head of the opposition, Cambodian National Rescue Party, the head was arrested very early morning or midnight. And yeah, it was explained already. And then also, it's bring the very big shock and the surprise and the kind of anger to many of the people. And also, this newspaper is that the last, paper for the Cambodian daily. In Cambodia, basically two good English newspapers named Cambodian Daily and Phnom Penh Post. But this shows in September 4th. And actually, this is the very last version, last paper of Cambodia Daily. Because a month before, the Cambodian government, or I should say Cambodian tax agency, request Cambodia Daily to pay for $650 million. Or anyway, very huge money for the tax and in charge for tax for the delay things, kind of punishment. Then Cambodia Daily tried to make a negotiation with the government and tax agency, but it's not hard. So actually, after 1 month after warning, this newspaper have to be finished and dissolved. So this is in two meaning that shocking to the Cambodian society and also international community who has interest in Cambodia and work with Cambodia for many years. Because first with the arrest of the head of opposition, without not so much clear, examined reason. And the second one is that actually Cambodian government and Cambodian tax agency would not want or did not want to receive money, rather than they prefer the Cambodian daily finish and go away. And it was, Cambodian daily was established by Bernard Krisha. And also now his daughter is running for the kind of, digital version for the news. Okay. So this is just the general view in Cambodia, in the rural area. But recently I was surprised because usually Cambodian rural population is more than 80%. But nowadays, because of kind of civilization, industrialization, rural population is getting less than 50% or so. And this is my very old friend named Yan Sang Koma, whom I work with in 90s as NGO friend. And he make his own NGO named SEDAC. And we invite him as an NGO person and expert on the agriculture and especially organic farming in 06 or 07. But now he became the head of the grassroots party for the, quite new and fresh political party in this very difficult situation. And this is general, impression we get from the villages in Cambodia. And even in any local village, we have the Cambodian People's Party, ruling party's kind of branch office everywhere. And again, needless to say, Angkor Wat and Buddhism in Cambodia. And any political party take power, then they put the Angkor Wat on the flag like this. Now we have the, after 93 election, the Kingdom of Cambodia kind of came back to connect with the 1907 Royal Cambodia, Kingdom of Cambodia, with the 21 or 22 year of absence anyway. And I should not take so much time on Khmer Rouge or Pol Pot, but anyway, then Chinese leader Mr. Deng Xiaoping helped Khmer Rouge. And it's quite, ironic because Mr. Deng Xiaoping was pressured and then kind of oppressed by the Chinese Cultural Revolution people. And Khmer Rouge seemed to have the similar policy of the Cultural Revolution group. But Deng Xiaoping helped this Khmer Rouge. And then this is 80, very, silent Phnom Penh and quiet Cambodia at the time. And thanks to many people, for political parties and Cambodian people and 16 countries and the UN and the international community, we have get finally the Paris Peace Accord in October 91. So this we have 27 years. And the Paris Peace Accords, of course, that many kind of words and articles, but the principle of new constitution and the supreme law and the human rights. The second is human rights protection and neutral nation and liberalism based on multi-party system and independence of judiciary and additionally decision by more than 2,000 MPs at the National Assembly. But anyway, this very basic principles set in the Paris Peace Accord and also the time of general election in 93 And now top of the Cambodian government said that the spirit of Paris Peace Accord became ghosts in a way. They died, he said openly. And this Mr. Akashi should have been here, and he should have many, many things to talk to you. But sorry, he was absent today. And under King Norodom Sihanouk and Mr. Akashi, Antak election was made. Of course, at the time, Mr. Sihanouk was, Prince Sihanouk was not king yet, but anyway, they two worked together with many, many nationals of people and Cambodians. And this is very kind of a unique system. Under King Sihanouk, there are two prime ministers kind of sharing of powers. First prime minister is Mr. Prince Ranarit, the son of Prince King Sihanouk, and Hun Sen from People's Party as a second prime minister. And in 1907, just 4 years after the election, it was the coup d'etat was happened. Sorry, this is put in Japanese, but anyway, Newsweek showed this coup d'etat, and Hun Sen-pek, the first prime minister's military and party members and the policemen was what they say to be caught, and at the time. Even the small power, but our friends, human rights organizations such as Ad hoc or Ricard made very much effort to save those lives to be caught or to be followed or to be, those in the runaway. So that was quite interesting because in 1907 I was in Cambodia, so I worked with those human rights organizations, and I witnessed that in front of my eyes, several 4 ex-soldiers who came to be saved and to be back to home in Battambang. And this is the quite what you say typical People's Party's banner in the day of 00 or even after 15. One was Mr. Chiashim was died 3 years ago, and now Hun Sen and Hen Samri still survive. And the 2013 general election is quite epoch-making because before that CPP has 90 seats at the assembly or diet among 133, but it became 68. They lost 22. And the Cambodian National Rescue Party just made about 6-7 months ago. They have a 2 party get together in 1 party. They get 55. Some observers would say in this year election, the so-called opposition might have won the election. So, because there is so many, what do you say, kind of tricky way of the collecting the votes or damaging the other party's votes or something like that. And anyway, this was made because still CNRP, opposition party, could say they kind of win or they make very progress because of very dramatic return of Sam Rainsy, then head of the CNRP opposition. And the youth, the population like this among the total population, those what do you say, feel the opposition to be familiar or to be friendly over their what do you say policy, and also with the development of SNS. Also, this is kind of bring the favorable way for the opposition at the time. And also, there are policy relating minimum wage to be up or something like that. And kind of they opposition kind of very big progress, and they could say they won. And also, this is a little bit after 2 years later, when Mr. Samransi was kind of ousted of the country. They have the press conference to be here, FCCJ. And also, one of opposition's strength is that they care about the garment factories, workers, mostly women. They work and opposition work and help those people or try to make the trade union for the workers for the sake. And also again, and very short time after 2013 election, usually any election afterward, there was sometimes 6 months, 1 year conflict not to recognize the result of the election or something like that. But after a few months, this case, after 2013, Hun Sen and Samransi shake hands for the short period. And for this turning point of 2013 election, actually the ruling party feels some fear of the possibility of power transfer, and it's kind of possible reality in 2018. And also they may make middle long term of strategy to reduce the possibility of power transfer. And they make the law of NGO to make management and control of all NGOs, and utilizing law on political party and election, and also many things, utilizing any law and including tax rules or whatever to try to push anti-government opposition politicians or party or NGOs or media like that. And this was the one human rights organization. The Ministry of Interior and the police arrest 5 of them. And ordinary people said that after that, because this arrest has got basically, in my understanding, not have very clear reason. They ad hoc and this stuff make everyday ordinary work to help the poor people who have to appear on the court or to attend court case or something like that, or to serve as a witness. And they make the advice and they make they help for the small fee of the transport or food or something like that. But the Ministry of Interior Police, especially this time, anti-corruption unit, has got that those people and this organization may kind of bribe to change the opinion of witness or something like that. And on that base, they arrest for these 5 people. And the top of the organization, the ad hoc, is Mr. Tun Sarai. He's a kind of symbol of human rights in Cambodia in history. And he, of course, tried to protest and try to help his 5 of the colleagues to be out of kind of detention centers or prison. But it was not successful. And then in the opposite, he himself has got faced kind of possibility of being arrested and several other things. So he came out of the country and he settled in Canada now. And he is the person who was arrested in Khmer Rouge one time, nearly 1 year, and arrested and held in jail in 1991. That was the so-called hand-hammering Hun Sen regime, because he was a group to insist for the multilateral, multi-party system of democracy for that reason. And the Paris Peace Accord released and saved his life. His health condition was really getting worse, and if the detention will prolong some more months, he might have lost his life. And after that, he came up jail. He was invited by many political parties, but in good position with good money, but he refused. And because of with his own experience and Cambodian experience, he wished to have Cambodian own human rights organization. And other human rights organization, a very good one, very active one, is RICARD, headed by the Kek Galabru. She came back from France, and she herself is a medical doctor, so she cares about the situation also inside the jail too. And left-hand side is that Mr. Kem Lee. This is a friend of Mr. Koma, and who made the grassroots party. But about 2 years ago, he was shot dead in front of convenience store and cafe. And at the funeral, some people say nearly 1 million of people joined the funeral. And this is another NGOs, election monitoring NGOs, and then headed by Mr. Cole Panya, who is head the COMFREL. But also not only COMFREL, but 40 groups together to make election monitoring for the last year case, the commune, local level of election. But the situation room composed of 40 groups. It's a very loose kind of network of the NGOs and groups. But the government and the Ministry of Interior make the warning that situation room has not got registered itself in the law and in the ministry. So they have to dissolve something like that. And also situation room said the similar things with opposition. So you work for these groups work for the opposition party. So it's out of the law and the rule of NGO law, something like that. Anyway, they have to accept the kind of pressure. So situation room dissolved after 1 or 2 months after the local election. And one thing, local election was very well organized and implemented. The NEC admit that, and a ruling party admitted that, opposition party admit, and also UNFREL or COMFREL, any election monitoring groups admit that. And from now, it's the very last free and fair election in Cambodia at this moment. And usually we have including People's Forum on Cambodia, we have press conference after election, like 08 and any other year of the election. But this year, maybe we would not have this kind of press conference of the COMFREL or UNFREL or NICFEC.
Mr. Kumaoka, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're going to run out of time for any questions. So if you could conclude your presentation.
So now, why this background is that one is that power transfer inside the ruling party, ? And the second one, what element is presence of China and the so-called China factor, and something like that, and worsening situation. But still we work and we go for this year's election in Cambodia together with COMFREL, NICFEC, and UNFREL. Thank you very much for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll open the floor to questions. Any journalists who wish to ask a question, please raise your hand, come to the microphone, introduce yourself and who you work for, and anyone else who may have questions. I have a couple just to kick things off. According to your paper here, the proposal to the government is your position that Japan's government should stop assistance to Cambodia under the current circumstances? We know that the EU and the United States has withdrawn any aid for the current election. There have been protests around the world by opposition parties calling on Japan to also withdraw all of its aid to Cambodia for the current election. Is that your position? And if so, have you made that clear to the government? Has the government responded? Could you also give us a sense of when you presented this proposal to Japan's government, what is the appetite for following up on some of your suggestions? Anyway, they're just a couple of questions from me. They're open to anybody who wishes to respond.
Let me reply first, because I'm a joint representative of this proposal. Obviously, this issue is not actually clearly mentioned in our proposal because, as I said, this is more general sort of observation and also a proposal for the ODA policy general by Japan, I think. So, but so specific, of course, regarding question about this Cambodian assistance, of course, NGO has Kumaoka-san has another view, but our view for this member for sign up is not necessarily stop the aid assistance flatly following US and other Western countries because we are more concerned about the people. The Japanese government always defend this continue to for assistance the consideration of China. If Japan retreat, the China will get in more and more influential. It's not good for Japanese interest and also any other Western countries, something like that. So that is a defense excuse. We are not always supporting this excuse, but anyway, we are more preferable for the constructive approach. The more gives negotiation dialogue still, I think, behind the scene, I hope. So anyway, we will just stay, especially grassroots level. So that's why we have stressed the civil society's commitment is quite important. Thank you. Anything you want?
Yeah, we have been talking with the foreign ministry for past 2 years for especially this present political situation. And in my understanding, they stick with the committed policy and sovereignty issue. And also they, again, stick with the back curtain diplomacy, or another word, silent diplomacy. And for that, more than half of NGOs are against, and they request for the, stop of aid to election or aid for Cambodia. So there are split of the opinion among NGOs. Thank you.
How about the question about, in offering your proposal here to the government, can you give us any sense of the appetite for change, like is within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? I mean, what do you sense from them?
Yes, I think probably Professor Ichihara will more clarify it. But my response is that Japanese government is, as you know, especially current regime, the Abe administration, just promoting some sort of a free and open Indo-Pacific strategy or something. So that is a kind of allied of the Australia and others in the areas for this, just for maybe confronting the China's one belt, one road policy, something like that. So this Cambodian issues, this kind of one of the pictures, it's very important, steps. So in this sense, Japan should take initiative more. because of the American factor also, the Americans retreating actually value, diplomacy is now just a setback. So it's a vacuum, and UK and Europe is really another problem for the Brexit or anyway. So the world is now, unfortunately, the setback for this democracy, and civil society is more or less liberal world is shrinking, and it's a risky time. So that's why the Japan should take initiative for more confidently, not just following Americans so far. Just we should show the historic positions, because Cambodia is Japanese really is a significant historical kind of cornerstone. So now this is a question how Japan will contribute or not. So in this sense, I think Japanese government, also civil societies, are quite eager to promote still the Cambodia's peace and democracy anyway. Even it takes time. One of the, I think, hope is, as I said, now Ministry of Justice is a bit proactive for the sort of sending expert for the rule of law project. It's not yet successful yet, but anyway, the form is there. Positive law, drafting law, and training judges and lawyers. In Cambodia, it's when we arrived there, no lawyers, always everyone just killed. So now the 800 to 1,000 lawyers, half of them are just trained by Japanese government for this project, or the JICA-based project. And so, yes, now it's politically very difficult, but we trust the people's lawyers in Cambodia will learning, and the next generation, I am very much confident the Japanese civil societies will support more as a solidarity. Thank you.
Can I just clarify that point? So you estimate there's now about 800,000 lawyers in Cambodia, and half have been trained through Japanese aid programs. Is that correct?
Sorry, not 8,000, 800.
800,000.
Maybe almost 1,000 now, I think. As far as I know, from the zero, the Japanese government also trained through the Bar Association Cambodia. So they, anyway, not only in Japan but also Cambodia, we still also committed to Japan Federation Bar Association. We have a meeting this morning. We are independently assisting, going to have a seminar and giving some discussions how to interpret laws and so on. Of course, and politics just sometimes obstacles impede these efforts. But I think because I have many students studying in Japan, they are now working very cautiously. So in this sense, we should encourage these lawyers and also students to be getting some power in the future. So that is, I think, the Japanese strategy on a long-term basis.
I see. Ichihara-san, did you have a response?
Sure. Of course, we want to see change in Japanese foreign policy regarding Japan's official development assistance and democracy support. It is not that we are requesting the Japanese government to name and shame those authoritarian governments that oppress civil society actors, but more to bring the Japanese foreign policy in line with its stated values-based diplomacy to protect human dignity in other countries. One of the problems I find is that, at the time when the Freedom of Arc and Prosperity Initiative was launched in 2006, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Japanese government did not create any new position or institution to initiate new type of democracy support sort of activities. And so it turned out to be JICA, which was in charge of providing development assistance in line with freedom of work and prosperity. That continued after Prime Minister Abe came back for the second term in 2012. But JICA's mission does not include political development assistance, but mainly development, development assistance in terms of socio-economic, aspect. And so JICA tends to refrain from search a new kind of demand for political development. And so we urge the Japanese government to create a new position within MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to implement new policies related to democracy.
Okay, do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Tomohiro Saki from the Japan Times. I have a follow-up question on the Cambodian election. There is a fear among NGOs and rights groups right now that Japan offering assistance to the Cambodian election basically means that Japan is endorsing an election that can't possibly be free and fair in light of the deteriorating democracy in Cambodian politics. How would you respond to the criticism?
Yes, of course, we are considering this, but I think now Kumaoka-san will reply about this because the NGO already have some action. Yeah.
We talk with the Cambodia NGO and Thai NGO in May and also January in Bangkok, and it's not colorful decision, but those NGOs, originally the monitoring election NGOs, this time would not make registration at NEC, and instead they make the general social observation of the country, and also they continue the same voter education in Cambodia, and also they said that they protect the voters' right to vote or not to vote. So they are not, agree with very forcibly sending voters to voting places, or another way of the, kind of boycott of the election. This is, in my understanding, that the kind of collective, NGOs position, especially relating election monitoring NGOs, decision for this coming 2018 election this time.
So I think Mr. Kumaoka already submitted some letter to the Minister of the
Because
Foreign Affairs,
of the May decision, we came to the Japanese government foreign ministry that this is only a part of the whole thing, but not to send the official election monitoring team from Japanese government, because two reasons. It's kind of, it looks like to, admit and accept the very problematic political situation in Cambodia, especially after that one, that the top of the head of the opposition was arrested, and also the opposition itself was dismantled, and 55 seats distributed to the ruling party and 3 other political parties, and also local level commune, 5,000 seats were given or distributed to ruling party. So this is one thing. And the second thing is that several countries, very authoritarian regime country, going to make official monitoring on general election for this occasion, and they surely they support Cambodian government at that time, at this moment. So they naturally wrote that this time of election was made basically free and fair or something like that. So if Japanese government send official delegation, of course, if they make the official dispatch of this monitoring team, and they said in the paper this was not basically free and fair election, that is great, but it would never happen, we think. So we ask, and our Cambodian or Asian friend request that Japanese government should not participate in the official sending the election monitoring team from Japan. And their answer is that in June and early July, same. They said, our foreign minister said, they do not decide yet. But if they do not decide yet, it means it's too late if organized. So it means, the answer means that implicitly that they would not send official governmental election monitoring team this time.
So Mr. Kumaoka is going to this election time, 29th, so he's monitoring the situation, and maybe he report back how this actually as a private capacities. So we are of course to prevent any sort of it's just a legitimization for the by the Japanese assistance for the election itself. Japanese of course assisted for the technical things. The government always, discuss. We don't interfere with the internal affairs of the politics, but this kind of things sometimes justify this election of some fair and free and fair. That is not a good thing for anyway. For civil society is always watching from the side of the peoples. So in this sense, we are also keep in touch with the ministry, not to use our assistance, our taxpayers' money should use for such kind of legitimization of this kind of not fair and free election. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Yes, please.
今決めてないってことは絶対無理。
Right. Walter Sim from the Straits Times of Singapore. If I may be allowed to ask a more general question outside the framework of Cambodia on ODA in general. I mean, Japan has the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. China has the BRI. India has Act East. South Korea has the New Southern Policy. How do you see all these different infrastructure strategies coexisting? And Prof. Sato briefly elucidated on this earlier, but how do you see Japan's considerations on infrastructure aid being impacted by all these different competing strategies? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you're asking about some infrastructure, maybe some sort of AIIB or something like that. Yes, I think Japanese government is also considering very carefully these working with China. Of course, we are not refusing or something, seeing the China as an enemy or some just competitors. I think the Chinese investment infrastructure is very good if it's sustainable and good for the people. So we are wondering how's going on, because some record even in China and some sort of facts recently, the several cases. So we are always welcome to have a dialogue with China for these governance issues. If Japan will participate AIIB or even the One Belt, One Road. So in my understanding, that's Japanese initiative strategy for this free and open Indo-Pacific is a sort of a deal with China for more sustainable peace and development, SDGs is one of such a common base. So we should discuss through the Cambodia. I think in my gut feeling, that's why the Mr. Akashi is in Beijing last week for discuss it. So we are also supporting his initiatives and hope the Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kono, is working for that.
Well, if I may follow up, well, Free and Open Indo-Pacific initiative was gave birth after sort of following Prime Minister Abe's Asia's Democratic Security Diamond, which appeared in the Project Syndicate in 2013. And so initially it had the sort of connotation that it was a pro-democracy, pro-China sort of strategy. But initially, apparently, India and Australia was sort of reluctant to strengthen their relations with Japan, based on this Indo-Pacific, free and open Indo-Pacific initiative, because it had too much color of anti-China. And so, I think, although in India and Australia showed interest in the FOIP, free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, but eventually it would, I think, need to weaken the color of democracy in order to avoid the impression that it's anti-China sort of initiative. And so, I think there's a sort of big possibility that those networks of alignment or de facto alignment would coexist amongst different types of networks.
Okay, oh, yes. Can I ask one question before you, see if we can fit you in? According to, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in the election in 2013, the Cambodia National Rescue Party, I think, won about 30% of the vote, which suggests there's substantial support for the party within the country. Now we have the leader imprisoned on treason charges, and we have the party leaders in exile, and we have agitation, if you like, around the world through protests and what have you about what's going on. So what's your sense, again, on the ground in Cambodia for the possibility of violence around the election, post and prior?
I think it's no one can foresee, but in my understanding now, power structure in Cambodia is so rigid, so kind of stable. And of course, there might be small scale of the kind of, conflict or combat between the kind of demonstrator and police or military. It could be possible, but generally, nowadays, that because people, including voters or anyone, have a very deep feeling of fear because they have seen past 2 years things. So they might be arrested or their family might be arrested. So of course there could be very brave people to have, again, make voice against this regime. But I think basically it's kind of very small scale and small possibility in my understanding.
But understanding maybe this, psychologically it's very difficult. We are worrying about any sort of resuming such as a chain of terror, which actually created such Khmer Rouge monsters. We have to learn history, take lessons. I think the current regime of the Cambodia should have known, of course. So, but we have to support this blocking any sort of shielding. So we try to be a human shield for block any such a chain reaction of the terror and fear.
We're right on the money. Is your question a short one? No, it's 3:45 apparently. Can we extend, Ito-san, a little bit? Do you have Yeah? Can you stay a few minutes longer? Okay. Dozo.
My name is Kurt Sieber. I'm an associate member. I'm Swiss, and in that position, I consider myself a little bit qualified to talk about democracy, and I'm also very often asked about my opinions. Mm-hmm. It's somehow connected what Peter just said about the 2013 elections. If I look the comparison between 2008 and 2013, I think that from a legal point of view, Cambodia has a very good system. In fact, it's probably much more a European system, and if I may say so, Japan could learn a lot from this system because same as in most European countries, you have a 5% rule, so which forces the opposition to get together and not be split up all over the place. But so my question is, what are the parties who are competing now for the 2018 elections? I mean, aside from the fact that, of course, if the election is not done properly and not implemented properly, those are things I cannot comment on based on figures which may not be realistic at all. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Democracy, of course, requires, of course, some election, general election, but that is not all of the democratic factors. I think Mr. Kumaoka suggested Mr. Koma for this farmers created a small NGO called Grassroots Farmers NGO or parties. I don't know how they will get their sort of vote from the peoples. This is one thing we are very curious, how this really grassroots party, such a marginalized farmers, will gain some support from the people or not. So that's some small, not of course enough power to just successful transfer of the power, but this sort of vote we can consider democratic sort of factors. I think 2013 election, the People's Parties lost seats. So that's why the many, corruptions be also reduced. I was told some local taxi driver told me. After that, such corruption and any such violence numbers are reduced. So the government will, of course, consider these political factors. So that is one of the good signs, even if it's not possible enough to transfer the power. Yeah, maybe historically it's not so easy. I also told my students, in Cambodian history, it's never happened any such a non-violent transfer of the power. So it's quite difficult, of course. So they are now preparing for any up and down. So in this sense, we take a long view of support, I think. Anyway, some sort of a change from the people themselves, non-violent way. So we try to guardians or support this sort of a civil society's movement, non-violent campaign for this. And also social accountability, as you know, it's also important. We also request explanation from the government. Supreme Court, give such a decision to dissolve such a main opposition parties. as a lawyer, we should examine the reasoning or laws. Is it really fair decision or not? So we should, each point, each issues discuss and also get the answer. So such a dialogue is important. And also, especially the Cambodian culture, we should also consider the face saving is also important. This is probably same in Japan, also China, also kind of mentalities. It's not so, we're like a confrontation about US or Europe, probably. Some sort of more static or subtle or sensitive things. But the growing such a democracy, even in the university or the civil societies, not only the high politics. So this is quite important. We should respect, we should encourage the people, Cambodian peoples, to actually act properly, non-violently for their own fate. So we should keep on. This is I think Japan should do, because we also have the same experiences. 150 years ago, we started the modernization, and 70 years ago, we had modern democratization under the American occupation. We are always struggling. Still, we are struggling. I don't think Japan is not so democratic as Europe or US, maybe. But anyway, so some pace of each countries. We have to be very patient on the one hand, but also we should be very cautious and stick and to committed ourselves.
Okay, well, we have just about run out of time there. I would like to make one final comment to Mr. Kumaoka. If you're going to Cambodia for safe journeys,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure if you'd be willing to do this, but the reporters here would be very interested in a cell phone number, if you have one, that we could call you on Sunday and get your impression of what's going on and what's happening. If you're prepared to provide it. Will you have a cell phone number in
Yes.
Cambodia?
I have.
Well, if you're willing to provide it to the reporters,
Yeah.
they might be
Okay.
very interested to call you on if you have time to take the call. But anyway, if everyone could just join me in thanking our speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.